Okay, welcome into another Dooley Noted Podcast. It's presented by Titan MRI and ABC Fine Wine and Spirits. We appreciate everybody for clicking on. If you're watching us live on Facebook or YouTube, we appreciate you. I know my brother watches. I talked to him Saturday. I went down, saw my dad, I went over to see my dad over in St. Augustine, and my brother met me there, and we had a good day. So I know he's watching, and those of you watching on Facebook or YouTube, you can ask a question, Facebook Live question if you want to, or if you want to get on our text line at 352-780-0720 to text us a question that we may ask. We have a couple of great guests today. I'm looking forward to it. Jeff Schultz, who is one of the best columnists, I think, in the country, who writes for The Athletic, and he wrote an unbelievable piece on Hank Aaron. We're going to talk about that, and also talk a little bit about Georgia basketball and Georgia football, where they're going. And also later in the show, Chris Lowe from ESPN, the old Bulldog, as I call him, because, man, he gets every story. He does a great job. He will talk just some college football with him. And obviously the big story, by the way, Friday, Ike Hillier going to join us. Pretty excited about that. And Monday, James Bates. So we're going to have some great guests again. We have great guests today. We'll have great guests for you on Friday and Monday, and we'll just keep it going here on Another Dooley Noted Podcast. I got to talk about the Super Bowl, but I could talk literally all day about those two games. There is something different about Championship Sunday. It is, to me, one of the great days of the year. Like my favorite days, I think I would go the Thursday of the NCAA tournament, the Sunday of the Masters, and this day's right up there with them. Opening day in college football, that's another one. But this one is right up there with them because of what's on the line. You know that the winner is going to the Super Bowl and the loser's season's over. And I know that you have that during the rest of the playoffs, but you don't have the winner going to the Super Bowl. So that dynamic changes it. It feels different. And I watched every minute of every game, and it was an unbelievable day. Now, obviously, I'm of a lot of people that are jumping all over the Green Bay head coach and the Green Bay secondary coach and the Green Bay defensive coordinator. They didn't get the job done. I'm not going to jump on Aaron Rodgers, even though if he had just run the ball on third down there, who knows what we'd be looking at. And I was rooting for Green Bay. I'll be honest, I've been a Green Bay fan for a while now, and not a big Green Bay fan. You can see I got a Seattle jersey back here too. It depends on how I feel about that year's team. So that was certainly, but I mean the story, as has been the story. We talked to Frank Frange a couple of weeks ago about the story was going to become Urban Meyer. And I'm like, no. The story is still Tom Brady. It was Urban Meyer for a day going to the Jaguars. But the story is still Tom Brady. It's an amazing, amazing story. So I saw somebody said he was like a Pinocchio or like a Disney character. And that he never ages and he just keeps coming back for more. So that was a pretty good analogy. What he's been able to do is just incredible. And he was great, but don't forget, in the second half of the game, he threw 3 picks. I know one was tipped and one was under pressure, but he threw 3 picks and they scored 3 points. But that was enough. It was enough because of the decision not to go for the touchdown there. And again, I just don't see any sense in that. I think if you got a chance to score a touchdown for 2 and tie the game versus let's kick a field goal and hope we can stop Tom Brady because he doesn't get many first downs. In hindsight, I know the coaches said, look, we had 4 first downs because of the 2-minute warning. Yeah, but it was Tom. It's just like coaches who don't understand when and when not to go for 2. I've been raving about this for a while, and it drives me nuts. Coaches in the NFL and college, more in the NFL, they look at what the score is instead of what the score might be. So when you when you go for 2 and you don't get it, what you have is a situation in this case where once New England kicked the field goal, now you could have scored it. I mean, if you kicked the extra point, you could have scored a touchdown and tied the game. It's just stupid. And of course, the Chiefs winning, I have a real conundrum with them because to watch them play, I love Patrick Mahomes. I love that team. It is the most college-like team in college football. And you saw the old like underhand shovel pass to the tight end that both Meyer and Spurrier both use variations of. I think they invented that play. But that tomahawk chop, just it's a little rough for me to sit through that. So what if Super Bowl we have? I saw where somebody says, you couldn't write this. I go, well, yeah, everybody wrote it. This was what we were going to have at the end of the year. It's going to be the Bucs and Brady against Mahomes, the defending champs. Everybody wrote it. So we'll talk about that. We'll also talk a little Gator basketball. And, of course, another good win for them. It was not great defense, but they got back on the boards and did a great job there, which is something this team was lacking early. They're getting better at that. And it was just an important win. Like I said, they needed to win by one. They won by more than one. And it was certainly an important win. Even though I know Georgia's way down in the net rankings, you still need to win at Florida. And this is how kind of weird the net rankings are. Florida went up 4 spots by beating a team that was way down in the net rankings. I can't, but it was a road win, and that's why it was important. All right, we'll right now go talk to somebody who wrote a column about that game and also, of course, has done some unbelievable work for The Athletic, and his column on Hank Aaron was one that was really special to me. As you know, I talked about Hank Aaron last week. Jeff Schultz joins us right now. Jeff, I got to put my headphones on. This is technical stuff here, so
yeah.
I just want to see. How are you, first of all?
I'm good. I'm just wondering, this is a podcast, so your listeners can't know this, but as I look at you on our Zoom connection, you're green. It's all green. Is there a message you're trying to send me, or it's like green sepia?
Well, let's talk about Henry Aaron first, because I read your column and you had 3 stories there, and I'm jealous of you in a little bit, because I only met him once and it was very brief, and you spent a lot of time with him, and it had to be a debilitating, like it was for me as a huge Braves fan who grew up watching Hank Aaron and listening to the Braves games. Milo Hamilton, that ball's going to take off and roll. For you, what was it like that day when you woke up and found out that Henry was gone?
Well, I wrote about this in the column, Pat, and thanks for having me. It would have been mind-numbing regardless, because even though he was getting up in years and his health was somewhat up and down, he had made some recent appearances, and so I don't think any of us thought it was we were at that point or anytime soon. And then I literally had phoned his office that morning to leave a message for his longtime assistant, Susan Bailey, to see if I could set up an interview with him for Black History Month that was coming up in February. And, Hank has been had been very selective about how many interviews he'd been doing recently. He wasn't quite as accessible, but I thought he might open up about this because he had been outspoken on a number of topics. And I would say less than 5 minutes after I hung up the phone and left a voicemail, did I see the news that he had passed away. And so I really went from one end of the spectrum to the other. And as someone who's lived in Atlanta for 31 years now, almost 32, you get to know the guy a little bit, and obviously everybody knows what he means, not just in baseball and here in Atlanta, but in so many issues related to race and philanthropy and everything else. And I'm still a little stunned. And throughout the column, I appreciate the comments on the column. Throughout the column I was writing, my hand was shaking a little bit. It's just like you just sort of go through a trauma and you just try to sort of fight through it. So it's, I'm glad he's, gotten the recognition, obviously, that these last couple of days have been pretty cathartic, reading some of the tributes to him and everything, but it's going to be a while before I think anybody's really sort of over it.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. And I do think all of a sudden people were like, especially younger people, that Henry Aaron, he must have been pretty good to hit all those home runs. And then they went back and looked at his other stats and forget that he was a great right fielder, especially in his prime. And all of a sudden they went, wow, he was really good.
Yeah, somebody pointed out a great stat to me, and I had seen it before. If you took out all 755 of his home runs, he'd still have over 3,000 hits.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, okay, I guess he didn't just hit home runs. Yeah, all the 40 home run seasons he had all the All-Star game appearances. I think the greatest baseball player there's ever been. I think just when you weigh everything, obviously there's going to be a lot of debate on that. He played his most of his career in Milwaukee, or all of his career in Milwaukee and Atlanta. It wasn't in major markets. I think he, as great as he is viewed, I think he would have been viewed next level if he played in a major market.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm kind of jealous of you because you did speak to him several times, and I know that he was guarded and who he talked to, as you mentioned, in granting interviews, and guarded with giving autographs. And you're like, well, why are you so guarded? Well, you didn't go through what he went through when he was going after the record and getting some of the letters that he got, and his kids are getting threatened to be kidnapped, and he's sleeping in the middle of the room in case something comes through the window. It's unbelievable that the stuff he had to go through and still was able to perform at that level.
Yeah, and I referenced one anecdote. The first time I actually met him was back in I believe it was 1991 when his autobiography came out. It was in a bookstore, and he signed a lot of books and I think posed for some pictures. But as you know, I mean, a lot of these book signings is people will show up with other stuff too, a bat or a ball or something else to sign. And generally speaking, athletes don't do that because then it just kind of gets unwieldy and out of hand. And plus, the other thing is, 9 times out of 10, that autograph isn't for that person. And so that person can also sell it to somebody else and bring it to an autograph show. And this first time I met him in 1991, rather, he had signed for whatever the limited amount of time was, 30 minutes to an hour. And then some guy showed up with a baseball or a bat, whatever it was, and I can't remember what it was. And he asked Hank if he could sign it. He goes, "No, I'm sorry, I can't do that." And the guy he yelled at him, "Oh, you just ruined your entire career." And as I wrote, I was ready to lunge at the guy. and Hank,
why didn't you? Would be my question.
I guess it's just because I'm a professional journalist, Pat. And Hank just sort of looked at him and smiled and said, "Thank you." He sort of pretended like he didn't really hear what the guy said, but it was clear what the guy said. And again, that little anecdote is so minor, so trivial compared to what he heard and what he went through, not just in his career, but his life. But certainly from the time he came into Major League Baseball, he saved all those hate letters that he got. He saved, he remembered all those things that he heard, not just in majors, but down in the minor leagues and the Sally League. And he put a lot of that in his book, which if anybody has never bought, I mean, it's worth the purchase or downloading. It's called I Had a Hammer, and a lot of that negative stuff is in there, but and I asked him about it. It's just like, well, it's history, and I want it to be down so people know about what happened. And let's face it, a lot of it's still going on today, right? But it was. I considered a blessing that I got to know him a little bit and talk to him, and had a great talk with him 2 or 3 years ago at the Civil Rights Museum in Atlanta, and that was at the time when a lot of athletes were deciding not to go to the White House after a championship. The Eagles and the Warriors had decided not to go, and this is the post Colin Kaepernick stuff, and a lot of athletes are protesting. It was becoming more high profile, and I asked him about it, and he basically said, I totally support them doing that. And he was asked at one point whether he would go to the White House if he was competing today. And he said, "Why? I've already been there. There's nobody there I want to see anyway." I mean, here's a guy who at the time I think was maybe 84 years old or something, and nobody can touch Hank Aaron. And it was good to see that he really hadn't changed. And he wasn't a bragging kind of guy. He wasn't a guy who went looking for the spotlight at all. He didn't, like I said, those last few years, he really didn't make a ton of public appearances because he didn't want to be in crowds or anything. When you got him and you asked him questions, he was straightforward and he was great.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's switch gears a little bit here, Jeff. Obviously, Florida came up to your neck of the woods and played a basketball game Saturday. You wrote about that. And this is a weird situation to me with Georgia and Tom Crean. Like, at the time, it seemed like, wow, Tom Crean's going to Georgia?
Yeah.
Anthony Edwards is going to Georgia? But the results haven't shown up on the court in terms of wins and losses.
Yeah, I'm not ready to pull the chute on him yet. I know a lot of people are. I know Georgia's not. I mean, he's 3 years into I think a 6-year contract, so it's not like they're going to fire the guy and go try to find somebody else, because who you're going to find right now anyway.
Right.
I think it's sort of like with every plus, there's a minus. Okay, great, you got Anthony Edwards to come here. Wait a minute, they only went 16-16 and won 5 games in the SEC. They've got some decent players this year, but I don't think he's recruited. If he's been able to recruit guys, he hasn't always coached guys up. I mean, but again, it's year 3. I don't know how many conclusions to draw yet. I know expectations were higher. I think expectations were meteoric, obviously, when Anthony Edwards was here. And I think, look, the truth is, Georgia basketball has largely been a losing proposition with a couple of minor exceptions. And no matter what somebody does, or until they do it, people are going to say he can't do it or they can't do it. And I think that's sort of how people are viewing him right now. They've got a few players. They don't have any size. It showed up in that Florida game the other day. They got outscored like 22-11 in second chance points. You just can't have that happen. And it was a very winnable game. Florida honestly didn't impress me that much, but Georgia was even less impressive. And we'll see what happens. They've got 10 or 11 conference games left. We'll see what they do. I don't think this season is going to define him in terms of whether they keep him or not, but I do think it's going to set the stage for him a lot going into his 4th season next year.
Well, the last time I actually saw a college basketball game that wasn't involved in Florida in person, Georgia was playing it. It was the SEC basketball tournament, which was the last game I covered, which is amazing when you think about it. What do you think the chances are of, because we keep hearing that people don't want to play tournament if they have a good team. The better their team, the less likely they want to play in the tournament. What are the chances you think of teams just totally saying we're opting out of the conference tournament, or that they even opt out completely of the tournament and not have them?
And I saw a report that Shaka Khan, as we're taping this, Shaka Smart. I don't know about Shaka Khan.
That's Shaka what I Khan. Say every time I see him. Shaka
Where the
Khan.
hell did that come from? Shaka Smart tested positive apparently for COVID, but it's impossible to answer your question, because look at the football season we just came off of, right?
Right.
I mean, for a time it looked like we weren't going to have any football. Then it was like, well, the SEC and ACC are going to go it alone. And then it was like, there's no way, the Pac-12 or the Big Ten are ever going to do it. And then they jumped in late. And I mean, it almost still seems like something that we're sort of making up as we go along. Nobody can really project how big an impact the vaccine is going to have right away. And it's going to have a different impact in different parts of the country. And it's going to have a different impact on different campuses within each conference. So it wouldn't shock me if we didn't make it to the end of the season. It wouldn't shock me if there was not an NCAA tournament or conference tournaments again. But I didn't think we'd make it through the college football season either. I didn't think we'd have a national championship game. I thought the season might make it to mid-November and we'd be done by Thanksgiving. So I don't know the answer to your question, honestly.
Well, thank you very much for that answer.
For your honesty, which makes a terrible podcast.
Yes, that's right. Well, let me ask you this then. Maybe I'll get you going on the Georgia football situation. And where are the fans right now with young Kirby, and where Georgia is right now?
I think they're everybody knows what he did. They got to won an SEC title, won a national championship game in only his second year. The third year they made it back, but lost again. There's the back-to-back years, consecutive games that were winnable, obviously. And so, you know how it is in sports, and particularly in SEC football. You sort of set that bar, and then you have to hit that bar every year, and he hasn't hit that. The biggest issue they've had with him, or I should say the biggest thing that has been perceived, is how he's mismanaged or screwed up a quarterback situation. What happened this past year wasn't really his fault, from the standpoint that nobody could have predicted that Jamie Newman would opt out 2 or 3 weeks before the season, or whatever it was. And you had Mark Rick saying when Jamie Newman had originally transferred in as a grad transfer from Wake Forest, he thought Jamie Newman might win the Heisman Trophy, or would have been a Heisman candidate. I don't know if that's true or not, but there's no question when he opted out and decided not to play, he said because of COVID, that it's submarine Georgia season. It was, even if they had won, they were never going to beat, even if he was there, they were never going to beat Alabama, basically. And so I think now moving forward, I don't want to say his job's on the line or anything, but I will say that there's a lot of pressure on him going into next year. But I think they're going to be pretty good next year. Pat, they've got, JT Daniels, the quarterback who looked pretty good down the stretch, is decided to come back. They've had a number of, actually, every offensive starter who started in the Peach Bowl is coming back. And so I think their offense could be pretty good next year. Defensively, they lose some guys, but then they lose a lot of guys in the secondary. But I think with a quarterback and good receivers, George Pickens and Kyrus Jackson, a couple running backs, the line, and I think the second year under Todd Monken, their offensive coordinator, I think it's going to pay dividends next year. So I think they're going to be able to score points, which largely has been the thing that has stopped them the last couple of years. It generally hasn't been the defense, even though they've lost some defensive guys. I'm not saying they're going to be great as you think of Georgia great defensively next year, but I think they're going to be good enough, and I think their offense is going to be good. But this is a conversation that we have all the time in January and February, March about Georgia football, and then you get to the season and something goes wrong. But as I look at it now on paper, I think they're pretty good next year. I think they're a top 5 team next year right now as I look on paper.
Yeah, well, you know who else is? Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, Oklahoma. Yeah. It's always the same guys. It's the same teams. I don't know what the answer is. We had Reese Davis on Friday, and I asked him about it, and he said, expand the playoffs isn't necessarily the answer. We don't know that there's an answer to this.
No, and I understand the expand the playoffs argument, but I don't think you're going to have a situation where you expand the playoffs to 8 or 16 teams or whatever, and you're going to have an NCAA basketball tournament situation where you start getting all these upsets. I just don't think that's going to happen in football. I think you could expand to 8. I think it's inevitable, but I think in the end you're still going to have the same teams there in your effective Final Four, your Final 2. But they're going to do it. They're going to do it because of money. They're going to do it because nobody cares about bowl games anymore. Nobody's going to games. And that was pretty much predictable from the moment they went to a 4-team playoff, into even a 2-team playoff. Nobody suddenly cared anymore about what bowl game you were going to. They just cared that you weren't one of the 2 teams in the championship game, or you weren't one of the 4 teams in the playoff. Everybody knew this was going to happen, and the bowl system is dead. It's pretty much dead. It's been dead for a long time, and I think that's probably why we're going to go to an expanded playoff. I just don't know that at this point it's going to make a difference in terms of who's going to be competing for championships.
Don't tell the new CEO of the Gator Bowl that it's dead. Greg McGarity would not be happy with you.
Well, he's probably not been happy with me a few times anyway, so it's okay. That would not be anything new.
Before I let you go, the Atlanta Falcons made a coaching change, and we know who they hired. Meanwhile, right down the road, your boy is back coaching the Jaguars, Urban Meyer. I'm just curious how you feel about that.
From the Falcons, Arthur Smith was one of the more sought-after candidates. I think he interviewed or was sought to be interviewed by all 7 teams that needed an opening. So I think that had an opening. So I think that speaks to him. Solid guy, versatile guy, but and I think a good choice from that standpoint. They got a better candidate than I thought they would, given their cap situation. But it's hard to prejudge a guy. It's like in basketball. You go from assistant coach to a head coach. It's a big difference. But we'll see. He comes from a good coaching tree, and my thought going in is he'll do a good job. They've just got some reworking to do with their roster and their cap. Urban Meyer, obviously a great college coach. Let's put aside any personal feelings that I may or may not have for a minute. You know him well. You know his downfall. You know his health situation. You know how he responds to losses. Pat, he may lose more games in his first year with the Jaguars than he lost his entire tenure at Ohio State. I know
will.
how he. What was that?
He will. There's no doubt about that.
And I've spoken to people about him who know him really well, who are friends with him, and somebody told me last week, after a loss, he goes into a dark place. And I'm not trying to be spooky or anything, but it's like this is a guy who does not take losing well, and I don't know if he can just flip that switch and change who he is. I do think the NFL is more and more like college every day in terms of the offenses they run, but it is still a different animal. Didn't have to deal with the salary cap at Florida or Ohio State. Didn't have to deal with roster sizes. You could make recruiting mistakes in college because you have 90 or 100 players on your roster. You can't make mistakes on player decisions in the NFL because you've only got 53, of which you only play 48, whatever the numbers are. I think those are the numbers. And so 46 maybe, I don't know. I lost track. I'm old, Pat. So my point is it's a different animal. It's still football. It's more like college than it used to be, but it's a lot different. And in the end, I just don't know how he's going to be able to take the losing. I really don't. And that takes away nothing from him as a football coach.
That's the biggest question I have for him. Jeff Schultz from The Athletic, we always enjoy you time and appreciate everything you do as a subscriber. I appreciate you very much. And keep it up, man. And I'll talk to you again soon, okay?
All right, Pat. Take care. Thanks for having me.
Okay, Jeff Schultz joining us from The Athletic. We'll be back after our break. But first, of course, we have to get to 3 things. We need, like, theme music for 3 things, like a little Johnny Carson. All right, it's time for 3 things presented by Trey Tucker, Executive Coaching. Trey is a licensed therapist and a UF grad who can take you from good to great. Actually, just talked to him the other day. We were just seeing how he was liking things so far. He loves the podcast, and we love him for being a part of it. All right, 3 things. Number 1, this quarterback shuffle we may be getting ready to see could be really interesting in the NFL. Think about it. You could have Rodgers, Roethlisberger, Deshaun Watson, and Matthew Stafford all with new homes. Now, I don't think the Rodgers thing will happen. I think he's upset. I think, but in the end, you know that he's a great player. Only won 1 Super Bowl. Only won 1 conference championship. In fact, Brady's won as many NFC championships as Rodgers. Think about it. And he's only been around for 1 year. But it won't be as seismic, that's not a word, seismic as the Brady signing, obviously, as we saw. But it could still make the balance of power all around this league all change. I think if you get Deshaun Watson or even Matthew Stafford on your team, man, you're going to be a better team other than about 5 teams. But, Kansas City would be one of them. All right, so it's going to be really interesting to see going forward. Number 2 on 3 things, shout out to my boy Robert Gillespie. I've always liked him. We've talked since he's been coaching in college and just kind of followed his career. Of course, former Florida running back, did a great job here. Once led the band and got a 15-yard penalty, which was the dumbest penalty I've ever seen in the history of college football. But Robert is now the running backs coach at Alabama. That's a great thing on his resume. It's just going to lift him up that far. I don't know why. Now, again, Florida's got a good running backs coach. I'm not saying he should be out. I'm just saying I don't know why nobody's ever hired Robert Gillespie here. Guy, was a great player for Florida. But as you know, now he was at North Carolina. Of course, he's been to South Carolina and Tennessee. Now at Alabama. As the great Will Muschamp once told me, you're loyal to your paycheck. And that's he's an Alabama fan right now. And number 3, Michigan, 14 days. They're shutting everything down because of actually the state made them shut it down because of positive COVID tests. This is what we're talking about, where things could get really interesting when we get into the college football season as we go forward. I mean, it's easier to shut down, as Reese was saying last week, a basketball program because only a couple guys need to be out or have an issue versus football. So we're just going to keep an eye on this and keep talking about it as we go forward. And anyway, it's time for us to get our break. When we come back, Chris Lowe from ESPN will join us. We'll talk some college football with him. Maybe he's got an answer for how can it quit being the same teams in every playoff. You're listening to or watching Another Dooley Noted Podcast. Thanks so much to our title sponsors, ABC Fine Wine and Spirits and Titan MRI, and to our pick sponsor, Leonardo's of Millhopper. You can find us live on Facebook and YouTube or listen at your leisure on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or wherever you find all your favorite podcasts. I'm excited to continue this podcast and to have your company on board as a sponsor. If you're interested in being part of the show, email me at patrickdooley54@gmail.com or give me a call, 352-317-3444.
Titan MRI, North Central Florida's premier independent diagnostic testing MRI facility. At Titan MRI, we're focused on you, the patient, having a great customer experience. Our MRI equipment is modern and 75% quieter than any unit in its class. And our MRI unit has one of the largest openings of any of the newer high-strength MRI units, which allows comfortable scanning for potential claustrophobic and larger patients. At Titan MRI, we look forward to serving you.
All right, welcome back to Another Dooley Noted Podcast. Appreciate everybody for watching or listening, either way. We will have a talk about the Leonardo's Millhopper Quick Picks, the Adams Herb Gator of the weekend. All that's coming up and more. But right now we're going to be joined with the great Chris Lowe from ESPN. Does a great job writing college football for them, and you see him on TV all the time. What do you do when there's no football to write about, man?
We write about Tennessee getting in trouble with the NCAA and the 14th coach search the Vols have had since since back when we were writing newspaper articles, which I know people think about newspaper stories, Pat, and they think maybe we were back with the dinosaurs roaming the earth, and we were actually writing stories from a 2:00 game in the afternoon that didn't appear into the newspaper the next day. Imagine how archaic that sounds right now.
I know. We chiseled them in on slate too. So
with the old couplers.
You were, yeah. Did you've had the couplers? You're old enough to remember that. But did you ever have to use a telecopier, the thing that whirled around? I think that may predate you.
No, but I think I saw some people using it back in the mid to late 80s, but I absolutely used the couplers. We had the high pitched tone. Yeah.
Now we're
dating ourselves.
Yeah, we'd use those telecopiers back in the mid 70s, and sometimes the page would split. 4 minutes it took to send every page that you wrote, and then it would split and you'd have to resend it. It was, I don't know how we did it.
I can remember oftentimes driving back from Hoover, Alabama during SEC media days, circa I don't know, 96 or whatever, and had a story to get in and maybe had written part of it and would stop and try to find in a hotel lobby somebody that had a phone line that I could disconnect the phone cord from just an old phone and plug it into my, the old, we called them trash 80s, the old laptop, send in my story. But yeah, it's times have changed, Mr. Dooley, or as the ambassador would say, Pat Dooley.
That's right. Well, mostly for the better, although sometimes not for the better, and sometimes Twitter gets a little bit out of control. And certainly Tennessee fans have been dealing with that, with names that keep coming up, and they get mad at this one. They already tried to take over the program once, and it didn't work out
well. That worked out pretty well.
But, I mean, does any of this Jeremy Pruitt stuff, was it surprising to you when it broke? Or you guys broke it, or was it you guys have been hearing rumblings? No,
I think we'd all been hearing things that this thing was not going to end well. Really going back to the end of the season, that he was going to have a difficult time. I'd said it pretty consistently when people would have me on and the stuff I did with ESPN that I thought this was probably not going to end well for him. Now, I don't mean the first part of the season. I'm not saying that, but as we got to the latter part of the season and you started hearing some things and you knew that the NCAA, or you knew internally that your own school was investigating. And Pat, you know this, man, you don't bring in Mike Glazer's group. You don't pay the kind of cash you have to pay to get Mike Glazer. You're talking about paying guys by the hour. You don't bring them on campus unless you think there's something pretty serious there and dig. I mean, they were on campus for a month and a half talking to people and interviewing people and digging. You knew at that point that it was going to be very, very difficult for Jeremy Pruitt to survive. So it ended about the way I thought it would. And, who knows where they go from here. Who knows how bad the NCAA fallout is going to be. Clearly they're going to get sanctions. And I think it just is a matter of how severe they are. I mean, we could sit here and speculate, and you've done this longer than I have. And that's my way of saying that you're older than I am. a nice way that I can say to my good buddy Pat Dooley. But if we get into trying to compare NCAA cases, this case versus that case, and what sanctions this school may get compared to what this school got 5 years ago or 20 years ago, then we're fools, because you just can't compare cases. I mean, sometimes, North Carolina had bogus classes. Right? Isn't that supposed to be one of the holy trinity? The NCAA is academic improprieties or academic fraud or what have you. They had bogus classes, and the Tar Heels got nada. You go back to USC, had the Reggie Bush agent stuff, and that was pretty much all agent driven, and they just absolutely got hammered.
Right.
With scholarship reductions and postseason bans. So I'm not going to try to guess what Tennessee's going to get, but I'll bet you it's going to be some type of postseason ban. I don't know if it's a year, if it's 2 years. But Pat, more damaging than that is because I don't think Tennessee's going to be any good next year anyway. And how many bowls do we still have coming off COVID? I mean, we don't know that. I don't think that's a huge deal. You know what the big deal is if they just get completely ravaged with scholarship cuts, and whoever comes in to be the next head coach, you're already trying to work from behind against Florida and Alabama and Georgia and all the teams you got to beat. And, oh, by the way, you've got half as many scholarships as those guys do. That's where you just absolutely get just pillaged if you're a football program.
Well, Chris, I know you've been getting this question, and I've been getting this question too. We've asked it of people that they, how good a job is Tennessee? And I'm like, this Tennessee job isn't very good. It doesn't mean it can't be good again, but with all the stuff you're going to have to deal with sanctions, it's not a great job. But the biggest problem, I think, is that everything around Tennessee got good. Clemson, Georgia, Alabama, Florida started to recruit better, obviously. So where do you think they're able to go here? Were they going to be able to get a big name, or is it going to be somebody that the people are going to revolt against and start writing on the rock?
Let's hope there are no more revolts. Put it this way: if there are any more revolts, I'm not going over there to do any stand-ups with people hollering and screaming and painting vulgar things in the rock like I did the last time. I'm not going to volunteer for that duty. I think to answer your first question about how good a job it is, we look at jobs across the country now, and we probably all have short memories. How good a job was Alabama when Saban took over in 07? How good a job was Florida when the head ball coach took over in 90? Now, they'd had some success, but they'd also had some years of their own NCAA issues, leading into Steve's first year was 90. Is that correct?
And they couldn't compete for the championship.
Well, but now don't tell him that they didn't win the championship.
No, they did
that year. Don't bring that up to him, because you know what that conversation turns into. Of course,
you still get it, do you, Pat Dooley?
We had the best record. So you're right. This Tennessee job right now is nowhere close to what it was. Let's say Philip Thorne would have stepped down in 2001, and Tennessee would have been looking for a head coach then. Then that Tennessee job, which is 20 years ago, almost 20 years ago, compared to what it is now, it's night and day. First of all, they had the recruiting machine rolling in. They were going into Georgia and getting great players, Louisiana and Florida and the Carolinas. I mean, they cleaned up in the Carolinas. But as you point out, you got Dabo at Clemson now. You got Mack Brown in North Carolina. You got Kirby down in Georgia. You got Nick going into basically any state he wants to go get players. Ogeron has done better in Louisiana. Tennessee always had success in Mississippi and Louisiana during that time. It's harder. The recruiting landscape is harder than it was. Now, part of that is, I don't want to diminish what Tennessee did, because they had a great recruiting staff. Fulmer, as a head coach, was a really, really good recruiting head coach, and they were able to get those players. So part of it was because Tennessee had it rolling, it was harder for the Georgias and even the Floridas and the North Carolinas and the South Carolinas and the Clemsons to keep those players in state. It's not quite like that anymore. So no, this is a job that's not, if you look at it from, if you're standing in Florida or Texas or, Virginia, and you're looking at the Tennessee job, it looks different than if you've got Tennessee orange shades on, because we're probably all guilty of where we live, and certainly if it's your school or you've been around somewhere for a long time, it looks a little bit different than it does to the rest of the country. And right now, I don't think the Tennessee job's nearly as attractive outside of Tennessee and outside of longtime donors and boosters and fans' eyes as it is, to people that are, coaches and administrators that look at it from around the country.
We're going to have the commissioner on, I think, in February on this podcast, and I can't think his mood is great right now. When you think about Tennessee's facing probations, what Auburn's gone through, what LSU in football and basketball, how Will Wade still has a job is beyond me. Florida just their head coach got a show cause. This was the league where Mike Slive came in and said, I want everybody off probation in, 2 years, I think? He told us at SEC Media Days one year. And now all of a sudden, it's like they're back to the old, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying.
Boy, Mike, I miss him. God rest his soul. I'm talking about Mike Slive. He used to just cringe when I would say that to him. I'd say, Mike, the SEC longtime mantra is, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. He just, he'd grit his teeth. And he didn't take kindly to that. But no, you're right. You've got several issues at several different schools right now, and Tennessee's the latest. Florida got hit. You mentioned Mullen in the show cause, and I think Tennessee's going to get hit pretty good. Of course, Ole Miss got hit several years ago. So there's some stuff. There's some cleaning up to do, some disinfecting, if you will, in the league. But the hard thing is, if you're going to be really good in the SEC at recruiting, David Cutcliffe used to call it the octagon. The octagon of recruiting in the SEC. That's a great term for it, because that's what it's like. You got to be pretty pretty savvy and pretty smart and pretty good at walking that tightrope, Pat. You know, you want to maybe live in the gray a little bit,
On
but
the
you
edge.
can't cross. Yeah, you can't cross over into it. And there's the old rule of thumb that there's honor among thieves, and nobody really wants to turn anybody else in, because you know what will happen to the SEC, what happened to the old Southwest Conference, where it just sort of burned up from within. But I do think that if you're going to recruit well in this league, you know, you better know how to play the game. And by playing the game, I mean, you know, sort of play in the gray, you know, smartly and not be reckless. And you better not. I think this is why I got Pruitt in trouble. You better not surround yourself with reckless people.
Right.
You know, you better know what you're doing. You better understand, you know, what you can and what you can't do. I don't mean if you can cheat better than somebody else. I don't mean that. I just mean you better know, you know, how to sort of walk that tightrope, and you better know the rules, and you better know who you're dealing with and how you're dealing with them. And I think as you look at some of Tennessee's issues right now, they had some people that just probably were in over their head and were sloppy and reckless and didn't do things the way they needed to be done, or the way you should do them. And I think Tennessee's probably going to pay the price for that.
Last question for you, Chris, and it's been great talking to you. What are the chances we have an SEC Media Days in July?
Boy, you know,
Because I missed it last year.
I do too, and I, you know, there's been a few of the last few years I've missed. You know what I missed the most about them, though, and I hate to go back down memory lane again, because we've probably already done enough of that. I'm sure people are going to watch this and say, these two old farts, all they're talking about stuff that happened 25 years ago. But don't you miss the old days at the old Sheraton Civic Center when we sat up there in that auditorium seating, and Spurrier would finish, or, you know, Lou Holtz would finish, and always Steve, and we get to go down and sort of circle around him after he was done, and that's when he would tell the best stories, you know, and you get that time around him. Those days are gone, man. It's all one group session, but I still enjoy being there and seeing people like you and all the people from around the SEC, those of us that are still left that were covering the league 25, 30 years ago. That's the part I miss, you know, and I miss sort of that camaraderie and seeing people and seeing administrators in the SEC that have still been around a long time. I hope there is an SEC Media Days, because you're right, that's always the unofficial kickoff to the season. And or as the head ball coach, talking season. Start a talking season.
That's right.
And nobody was better at talking season than the HBC. Now, he was pretty good on the sidelines on Saturday too. Don't get me wrong, but he knew the value to us. And people always say, you know, you love Steve Spurrier, Chris, and I'm like, yeah. I mean, he's always been great to me, as he has you two. I know you guys share a special relationship, but I'm not stupid either. I mean, Steve Spurrier was the best thing that could ever happen to us as media people. I mean, he always gave us stuff to write about. He was candid. He didn't care what other people thought. You know, he didn't worry about stepping on toes. And, you know, we sort of are sanctimonious sometimes in the media, Pat. We talk about guys being boring. They don't say anything. They don't give us good copy. You know, it's Charlie Brown's teachers, blah, 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 blah. And then you have somebody like Steve Spurrier who'll say anything, and people want to sort of criticize him. You know, you can't have it both ways. No. I mean, I miss that. I miss that part of, and that's why he made it so much fun. Was he perfect? No. Did he go out terribly at South Carolina? Yes. You know, I mean, but he was a fun guy to cover, and, you know, he made college football fun on the field and off the field. I miss those days, and I'm like you, man. I miss the SEC Media Days, and I hope and pray that we do get it in this year.
You know, one of my favorite stories was, like you said, after we got done with him, we got him over in the corner, and we're all talking to him. We're all asking questions about wide receiver. And what we didn't know is Matt Hayes had broken the story that morning about him becoming the first $1 million coach. And finally, he just looks up and he goes, "Matty, I guess they don't get the time machine." And we're like, what's going on? And the next thing you know, we're all scrambling to get back. We have quick question for you from that's our Facebook from Nick. Wants to know what your impression of how common is it to get cash in a bag? Just wow.
Well, are we talking McDonald's bags, or Arby's
so.
bags, or Bojangles bags? I guess it depends on the restaurant, right?
Well, and you remember the Kentucky did it in the FedEx thing, so they didn't worry about the bag. The old basketball.
You know, are you surprised, Pat, in the realm of SEC recruiting at any of the stories that are out there? And 10% of them might be true, or 90% of them might be true. But would you be shocked at any story you heard about recruiting and illegal payments?
No.
I mean, I wouldn't be. And if you are, anybody that is, their head's in the sand.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it's they've been under the table payments and extra benefits, what have you, given to players and families for years. And once we get into this name, image, and likeness, and kids can start doing whatever you want to call it, commercials, going to car lots and signing autographs for 2 hours and getting paid, those type of things. Is that going to change the whole thing? No, they're still going to be under the table payments even when that happens. I mean, it's just the way it is. So to answer your listener's question, I'm not surprised by anything. Now, was that really happening at Tennessee? I mean, clearly there were some things happening.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I can promise you this: I've never gone through a drive-through at McDonald's and had any cash in my bag.
Nobody's ever offered me anything to sign with them so far.
But I did once get to play golf with you on the old Caddyshack course.
We did. That was one of the best days of my life.
That was awesome. You know, was it Grand Oaks there in Fort Lauderdale?
Yep. I actually won that tournament. So
I think you did. I think
it was back when I used to be able to play a little bit.
You sound like the head ball. Every time I talk to Steve now about golf, he says, "Chris, I'm terrible now. I don't play golf nearly as well as I used to, but I still count my strokes. Still count all my strokes."
I actually played with him about a month ago. Shockingly, he beat me.
And you didn't touch your ball in the fairway. You didn't roll them over or anything.
You putted everything out. Yeah. Chris, it's been great talking to you, buddy. Stay safe, and hopefully one day we'll see each other again in person. But thanks again for joining us.
Yeah, tell the ambassador I said hello.
I'll do that. Chris Lowe from ESPN does a great job covering college football. We have to get to a break, and then we'll come back. We'll do the Leonardo's Millhopper quick picks and the Gator of the Weekend from Adam's Rib. We'll do all that and more when we return on Another Dooley Noted Podcast. You may be like the Florida football team and you want to move from good to great. I can tell you how to do that with the help of a Gator graduate. His name is Trey Tucker, and he's an executive coach and licensed therapist who can give you the kind of guidance that will unlock your potential. With one-on-one online sessions, he'll develop your communication skills, find your purpose, and identify your strengths. Take a step in the right direction with Trey Tucker by reaching him at 423-799-0769 or trey@tuckerexecutivecoaching.com. Executive coaching from a licensed therapist with more than a decade of corporate experience and someone who knows the fight song, what's not to like? And tell them Pat Dooley sent you.
Titan MRI, North Central Florida's premier independent diagnostic testing MRI facility. At Titan MRI, we're focused on you, the patient, having a great customer experience. Our MRI equipment is modern and 75% quieter than any unit in its class. And our MRI unit has one of the largest openings of any of the newer high-strength MRI units, which allows comfortable scanning for potential claustrophobic and larger patients. At Titan MRI, we look forward to serving you.
All right, welcome back to Another Dooley Noted Podcast. We appreciate our great guests today, Jeff Schultz from The Athletic and Chris Lowe from ESPN for joining us. As I said, Friday, Ike Hilliard is going to join us. That'll be a lot of fun to talk to him. He's currently wide receivers coach for the Steelers and has done a good job in the NFL being a coach there. We appreciate all you watching us on Facebook Live and YouTube Live. And, of course, you can listen to this podcast whenever on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, WRUF.com, where you can also see the back nine, which is up. I got it in early this morning, like 9:15. I don't know, I was in a mood. I had a lot of things to say about the playoffs and everything. or any of the other 39 platforms where you can find this podcast or your favorite podcast. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. And we still have, as we said, we have a couple of sponsorships still available if you want to get involved here. Be a good time because you get a couple free episodes, right? And then we'll start billing you in February. So it might be a good time. We appreciate, though, all of our sponsors. And, of course, especially Titan MRI and ABC Fine Wine and Spirits, our title sponsors who also bring you every one of these other things. We have presenters for all these, but they're a big part of everything we do. So let us go to Leonardo's Millhopper Quick Picks. And looking forward to go play. I think I'm going to play golf with my man Kyle over there on Wednesday. Maybe. I don't know. We see what the weather's like. In fact, I'm playing a tournament Sunday. I'm kind of fired up about that now that I have new irons. Now, my problem is these new irons my brother gave me, which are not new, but they're used, but they're new to me, have those stiff shafts in them. Or, that may be, I may not be able to generate a lot of club speed, but we'll try. Now, on the quick picks, you guys redeemed yourselves. The last 2 weeks, you've been awful. It's been terrible. But you redeemed yourselves, and everybody was pretty good. Most of you, I think all of you, picked Florida to beat Georgia. Good call. Most of you, some of you got tripped up in the Bills game, picking the Bills, but everybody almost picked the over, which was right. So a lot of you went 3-1, but one guy went 4-0. George Luttrell, who's frequently getting involved in the Millhoppers, Leonardo Millhopper Quick Picks, went 4-0. So he's the only qualifier from this week. I know a lot of you think, God, I got 3 right, and that wasn't enough. So Friday we'll have another one. We're not going to do one today. We're going to wait till Friday because obviously we want to get the weekend going and have a lot of different options to go at on the weekend. So excited about getting more qualifiers. We'll keep going through the Super Bowl. We may even go a couple of weeks after the Super Bowl, and we'll give away the prize package. I know Keith Collier was thrilled when he won the first prize package and got a lot of great things in that. We'll get a great one together. I know some Leonardo's Pizzas will be involved in that, and looking forward to it. So we'll do that again on Friday. All right, it is time now for the Adams Rib Company Gator of the Weekend. And we had a lot of options, obviously, and it is just going to get bigger and bigger, the options we're going to have. Everybody's going to be playing sports this spring, which is going to be unusual. And by the way, I want to wish a happy birthday to Michelle, Mrs. Adams Rib, who is her birthday is today. So happy birthday to Michelle. I used to see Michelle all the time when I would go to the Gainesville Sun and stop in there often to have lunch or a cold beverage. They have cold beverages at the Adams Rib South location. Of course, Adam tends to stay north, but we appreciate him coming on as a sponsor. And the Gator of the Weekend. Now we're going to do a Gator of the Week, which will be on Mondays or on Fridays, and a Gator of the Weekend, which will be on Mondays. Our Gator of the Weekend was a gymnast, Megan Skaggs. And Florida had an unbelievable meet that kind of was under the radar, because it was at Arkansas, and, people are kind of caught up in basketball right now in the playoffs and everything. But they had an unbelievable meet on Friday at Arkansas. It came right down to the last event, and Megan came through with a 9.95. It was her first time in the beam in 2 years. She also won her first ever all-around title. So congratulations to her and to the Gators for winning that. Now, I've told you that whether you win or lose, it's good to feel the pressure and try to win, but in the end, it's not that big a deal whether you win or lose. You never know what you're going to get with hometown scoring, but I still rather win than lose, right? They're keep the score, as the head ball coach likes to say. So Megan Skaggs is our Gator of the Weekend. And again, as we said, we appreciate Adams Rib for being a sponsor, and so much so to Titan MRI and ABC Fine Wine and Spirits for being title sponsors. We appreciate all you guys and everybody who contributes to this, and especially to Evan for doing a great job producing, Jeff Schultz, Chris Lowe. Wow. All right, I'm tired. I'm ready to cut it off. We'll be back Friday with a brand new episode. You're not going to want to miss Ike Hilliard. He'll be likely in the first segment, so I can't wait for him. We're going to ask him about his Gator career and, of course, his NFL career. You know, he knows a little bit about the Bucs, and obviously probably not rooting for him now that he's a Steelers wide receivers coach. But anyway, that's going to do it. Until next time, I am Pat Dooley. I'm deep, I'm way back, and I am out of here.